thought I would ease us into the world of Midrash, Proverbs and Midrash, something I'd like to develop in the next few months more. One of my a key section of Proverbs, or a section from Proverbs, a passage from Proverbs, is a key section in the work that I did on my PhD, which was never finished. So I want to share with you some of that in the next coming meetings. It won't be, that's why this chapter is only half of a chapter, because starting from verse 17 starts a section that is a focal point for the Midrash that I'd like to do with you. And there we'll be focusing probably more on the Midrash than we are on the biblical text. But I wanted to bring some more Midrashic text in today. Unfortunately, the first one I brought is pretty complicated. I thought I could possibly figure it out and iron out before we got together, and I wasn't successful, so we may skip it, but we will see some other things. And remember, we're in this first section of Proverbs, which many scholars date as being later. The fact that it's first in the book doesn't mean it's earlier material. In this case, it's probably later material. These are different kind of lessons, small little lessons about different aspects of living the good life. We had, and we will go back to the dangerous in quotes, seductive woman as a metaphor for evil, and in general, the good woman, who is a metaphor for wisdom itself. But now we go into a very specific, almost random kind of an issue of life, and that is an economic question. And I invite you, as we read this next section, to if you'd like to share with us, but to think of the times in life where you or each of us have been sucked into this kind of, or found ourselves in this similar kind of a situation, and what we learned about it, what we learned from it. So Les, why don't I'll ask you to do 1 through 5 to start us off.
Okay. My son, if you have stood surety? Surety? No, what's that word? Never heard that before. Surely, maybe?
No, it's surety means to guarantee a loan.
Oh, okay. If you have stood surety for your fellow, give your hand for another. You have been trapped by the words of your mouth, snared by the words of your mouth. Do this then, my son, to extricate yourself, for you have come into the power of your fellow. Go grovel and badger your fellow. Give your eyes no sleep, your pupils no slumber. Save yourself like a deer out of the hand of a hunter, like a bird out of the hand of a fowler.
Okay. What if anything, can you make sense of this?
Don't lend money.
Okay, that's kind of feels like the bottom line is, if you thought, or don't lend money, but actually it's not talking about lending money, it's talking about being a guarantor. That's what surety is. Yes, Ella.
No, being a signer for somebody else.
Right. So I don't know how often it happens here, but Sasha and I had to get cosigns a lot of things, not so much for we cosigned loans for a lot of people over the years in Israel. It was done. It was very common, or we guaranteed. We called it co-signing. We needed it for
It's very common here too. Very
Say it
common.
again. It is common.
Very
Okay.
common. Very common, yes.
But mostly relatives, though, right?
Mostly relatives.
Children.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe because I was a rabbi, or maybe because I think in the world that we lived in, the religious Zionist world that we lived in, there was a kind of a broader and deeper sense of trust about people, so you felt more comfortable doing so. Ella, please.
I remember a case, a very close friend of mine in Israel signed for his brother, and the brother never paid, and the relationship between the two brothers kind of fizzled. I mean, they didn't speak to each other.
Yeah.
Till my friend died.
Yeah. My father used to say, never do business with relatives, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I know that a friend of mine, a close friend of mine, went into, I don't know, financial whatever business, and she approached my husband, and he said, no, I don't do business with friends.
Hmm.
I don't, do financial business with friends.
Okay, now the totally interconnected, widespread out network of Rita Clara's family, I'm sure has some wonderful stories here. Please share with us just the things that we could be discreet about. Go ahead.
Well, my husband always said, do not loan money to a relative. Always consider it a gift. Do not consider it a loan. And if you're fortunate enough to get it back, good. But don't do it as a loan. Do it as a gift.
Yeah, I think that's lovely wisdom for those that are able to do that, of course. Yeah. I did get into trouble with one of my students, a colleague, who we signed for a loan that he got from a interest-free loan society. Gimilut Chasadim is kind of a thing, and actually in the end we actually had to pay his loan, but he did pay me over a span of a long time in installments. The question is, of course, when you get caught in that kind of situation, what's your lekach? What's your takeaway from it? And for some, it's never to do it again. For some, is to try to be less generous, more confident. But it's always about, are you able to? Can you really pay that loan yourself? I guess your late husband's wisdom would be a good thing to remember. Are you able to give that kind of a gift? Yeah. Yes. Somebody, Dan, did you want to say something? Yeah.
Well, my thought is, why is it in here, and why is it so powerfully stated?
Right.
Very
Excellent question. Yeah, like first of all, what does this have to do with what came before, what comes afterwards? Well, may have to do with what comes afterwards, but that's the character of this section of Proverbs is that it's not this beautiful tapestry of interwoven traditions about wisdom that each one can connect with the other, right? The way that very often other things are, other stories, and we may find that later on in Proverbs, but this is kind of sudden, and many commentators point that out. But also the last thing that you said, why is it here, and why is it so, I forgot the word you used, but
Ardent.
yeah, whoa, where is this coming from? Feels like this guy got burned bad, right? The father here, the teacher, was burned bad. It's extremely, it's extremely kitzoni, it's extreme position, which does not dovetail with other parts of the Hebrew Bible, of course. There are people who are co-signing loans and standing up for others in different ways. One of them is the narrative of Judah and Benjamin, and that's the story of which I don't think, that's why I think we might skip over the next midrash from Breshit Rabbah, where he says, I'll guarantee or Ruvain guarantees the firstborn's the younger son's life. This kind of one life guarantees for another. But you do have cases of people that have given surety. Well, let's just take a look at what are the other aspects of this. So there's something to do with your mouth. You've said something, right? And you've been trapped by the words of your mouth. Now, usually we would think of trapped by the words of your mouth as speaking evilly, lashon hara, right? Or you've spoken up, you've been a loudmouth, so you put a target on your back. But here you've spoken up, and I want to say, in kindness, your initial instinct was to be generous, and now look what you did, right? It's cynical. It's pretty cynical. So I guess maybe the greatest takeaway is that there's multiple voices in the book of Proverbs, multiple voices in Hebrew Bible, certainly. And this would be a counterweight to all those texts that say, love your neighbor as you wish to be loved yourself, for instance. Yeah.
What is the next part about coming under the power of your fellow, go grovel and badger? What does that mean?
Yeah, so usually, this is a complicated section. It took me a while to kind of decode this with the help of Fox mostly, but also McCann. The first part is you've gotten yourself into trouble. Now get yourself out of it, and get yourself out of it at any cost, right? You grovel and you what is it? The words are you grovel and you badger your fellow. You demean yourself and you make yourself a total nudge. Don't let it go.
But
Right?
trying to get the money back that you, or trying to get the
Don't
loan.
try to step out of the commitment that you made.
Oh, I see.
Right? You made that commitment. Nothing's happened. Like you haven't, in other words, a bystander is there, or the father is there, the teacher is there, and said, and here's his child say, "Oh, sure, I'll guarantee your loan." And then the father takes him aside. I'm making this up, but it's kind of as if the teacher takes him aside and says, "No, you idiot! You've just look what you've stepped in it. Keep your mouth shut going forward, and now do whatever you can to get out of it," which seems to us to be um, not in line with commitment and standing up for the right thing. Yeah, it's a very cynical section here, right? And so and then it makes use, as many parts of the book of Proverbs have, and we will going forward today as well, see, of different parts of the body to represent the person themselves. So you've gotten yourself up. First of all, you've lent your hand to another by being their guarantor. You've ensnared yourself by using your mouth. Go grovel to me sounds like get down on your knees. Give your eyes no sleep. And then comparing yourself to two types of animals which are hunted, a bird and a deer. So the combination of body parts, I mean it, I don't mean that in a negative way, body parts and animal kingdom, we'll see that going forward as well. Somebody wanted to say something, I think no. Yeah, I think we'll skip over, as I wish I had time to go back to the critical edition of Breshit Rabbah that I have, which has a really good commentary from the first part of the 20th century. But yeah, I didn't get to that. So maybe another time, but I think we're going to skip this. I think we'll get bogged down, needlessly bogged down. Richard, I thought of you when I saw this text.
Well, I'm not a co-signer to anybody else. Although I did, when I bought this house, my brother did have to co-sign for me, but I've long since paid the house off and paid him back.
Right. But as long as you're bringing that up though, but there have been issues, I think, in all of our lives, yours as well, Richard, I know, in which we've committed to doing something which has financial implications one way or another. And we're sorry. We're sorry afterwards we did it because somebody became very difficult with time. And then the question is, and I guess that's the question about, and then we'll leave this, the guaranteeing a loan, whatever. But that's how the financial world works. If a young couple's getting married and they need somebody to co-sign their rent or their mortgage, who else are they going to find? There's not always family members. It's a tricky thing. I don't know. We haven't been asked in the last 10 years, I think. Yes, we have. We've been asked for loans many times, and the philosophy of don't necessarily expect it to be paid back is a good one. Yeah.
Does this apply to a sort of loan borrower giver situation where somebody's giving collateral, or in other words, you're almost talking about doing somebody a favor, but what about a financial business transaction where you're lending money and you're getting collateral? Does this speak to that at all, or is it only when you're insuring something just as a goodwill gesture?
Yeah, it's speaking of the third person, if you will, right? The person giving the collateral. Now, in a typical situation like the Torah is really comes down hard on this one, or strong on this one, is if you have given if you need to give collateral, and there's verses that say you even the clothes off your back, you give when you are giving collateral for a loan that you take individually, when it's just one-on-one, and the limitations of that. The person lending the money cannot take that essential garment, poncho kind of a thing, cape, cannot. But this is a third person getting involved, and which makes it complicated. This is really complicated, right? Because without these third persons, the financial world doesn't exist. And by the way, this is not about interest right now. These are about loans, just simple loans. You can give in biblical literature. You can give a piece of land as collateral. In the story that we're not doing in Genesis 44, or towards the end of Genesis, they're giving their lives as collateral to guarantee something. Yeah, there's a lot of talk in the Talmud about collateral and what you can take and what you can't take. Eravon, Arbanos. Yeah. Okay. All right, Richard.
What? Do the next one.
Yeah, please.
Lazy bones go to the ant, study its way and learn. Without leaders, officers, or rulers, it lays up its stores during the summer, gathers in its food at harvest. How long will you lie there, lazy bones? When will you wake from your sleep? A bit more sleep, a bit more slumber, a bit more hugging yourself in bed, and poverty will come calling upon you and want like a man with a shield.
Okay.
Mm.
Some of this is simple, some of it's a little bit difficult to understand, but what are you getting out of this in general?
I shouldn't have slept in this morning.
Yeah, or you shouldn't be sleeping like this.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be hugging yourself. Yeah. It's that dangerous snooze button on our phone or our alarm clocks or our phones, right? What's your record of snoozing your alarm, Richard?
I actually usually wake up before the alarm goes off. Lately, I mean, when I was working, it was just the opposite.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Then when I was working, I would oversleep, but now that I don't work anymore, I don't oversleep. I wonder what that means.
It means we have to get you more busy, I think. Yeah. Okay. So an ant, comparing humans, using ant as a metaphor for hard work, I think is found around the world. Didn't bring other examples, but I think it's just so ubiquitous. And there's a turn at some point, right? In this little mini lesson here, this little mini lecture, in praise of the ant, learn from the ant, but starting off by saying, "You good for nothing." Get it. So there's already a tone set to the lesson being given to the person who's getting the lesson. All these wonderful things, and then how long will you lie there? And then all the things, the lying there, not awake, a little bit more sleep, a little bit more slumber, a little bit more hugging yourself in bed, and before you know it, you're distraught. And I think the juxtaposition of this section and the last section, there is some logic here, is that you don't want to become the person that needs somebody else to guarantee their loan. You don't want to go. You want to stay, and you want to be prosperous, and you've got to do it. The last part is poverty will come calling upon you. So there's a lot of anthropomorphism here, right? There's anthropomorphism of the ant. There's anthropomorphism of poverty. Poverty will come calling, right? And the last one is a little bit difficult to understand. Umachsorcha ki'ish magen, and want, and you'll have missing, you'll be wanting, you'll be in want, like a man with a shield. And people don't necessarily understand what that means. I'm not sure I do. One interpretation is that somebody who's running and always defending themselves, man with a shield. I don't really know what to do with that. I don't have, but I do have an interesting thing that I had never seen before. And I love this because this will bring us to the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures that was done 2nd, 3rd century BCE. And often that text will reflect a slightly different text, sometimes slightly different text because our text is problematic. Unfortunately, it's not going to solve the problem of, well, maybe it would. I should look at that. But sometimes you get additional text in the Septuagint, and you wonder, is there a piece that the copier of the Hebrew text is jumped from one to another? That happens, like from one line to another, because they begin with the same word. And so you could skip a line that way. All the things that we remember when we used to copy things by hand, right? Before we cut and paste digitally. And so one of the questions is there something extra, or is it because the Septuagint translator said, oh, I have another thing. Why just talk about ant? Let's look at this. So I only discovered this after I sent out the sheet. So let me share this with you. I added this to the sheet for the next time if I ever teach this again. Not if, when I teach this again. And that's the LXX. I assume people can see it, right? Yeah. So if you could compare this as Richard reads this text with the text in front of you, this of course is this is a British translation, an older British translation of the Septuagint. So a lot of the words will be different, but try to see what is different in this translation, this ancient translation of our text in Proverbs. Richard?
Well, I'm not sure I understand what you're asking.
Oh, can you, no, can you read it out loud for us?
Oh, read it. Oh, go to the ant, O sluggard, and see, and emulate his ways, and become wiser than he. For whereas he has no husbandry, nor anyone to compel him, and is under no master, he prepares food for himself in the summer, and lays by abundant store in harvest.
So up until now, that's more or less the same. A little bit difference, become wiser than he. That's not reflected, at least in the Hebrew. Now go on.
Or go to the bee and learn how diligent she is, and how earnestly she is engaged in her work, whose labors kings and private men use for help, and she is desired and respected by all. Though weak in body, she is advanced by honoring wisdom.
So that's totally different. That's a whole extra section, isn't it? Yeah.
Mhm.
And you might say, well, yes, you've got the ant, you got the bee. Some scholars here just say it's totally superfluous, right? But it just is, oh, I know something about another animal, another insect that can teach us about life. I like the idea that, the bee, it is kind of, it's not the opposite. It's not, it's another example of the learning from the animal kingdom. And what we get from this is the ants see for themselves. They tend for themselves, and they're a very good working, well-working society system. The bee adds here that human beings have benefit from bees as well, right? And that's the hinting at the honey for royalty and for free people, or whatever the meal was.
Busy as a beaver,
Is he a beekeeper?
busy as a beaver.
Bees, yeah, well, sure. We could go on and on. Yeah.
So I have a question though. What is the literal translation of the Hebrew for lazy bones? The first 2-3 words.
Yeah, atzel. So if you look on the, yeah,
It would be Atzlan.
in modern Hebrew it's atzlan, but in biblical Hebrew it's atzel. That is the person himself. Atzel, and so those are changes that are made between. Maybe atzlan is also in biblical Hebrew, but here it's atzel. Lech el nemala atzel. But we use it in modern Hebrew as an adjective, as in the famous song Ella. Kum bachur atzel v'tzel li'avoda. Kum bachur atzel v'tzel li'avoda. Tzei, tzei, tzei li'avoda. Tzei, tzei, tzei li'avoda. Kukuriku, kukuriku, tzei li'avoda. Kukuriku, kukuriku, tzei li'avoda. I knew you'd like that one.
I haven't heard this in, I don't know, 100 years.
That's why you come. This is or
Right.
you get to hear things you haven't heard in 100 years, which means get up, young man, young lazy man, get up and go out to work. Go out to work. And then kukuriku, which is Hebrew for cock-a-doodle-doo, right? You know that, right? I hope everybody. You know that animals speak different languages. Like in the dog in Hebrew doesn't say bow wow, or ruff ruff. The dog in Hebrew says hav hav. Hey bet, or what other tzif tzif. The chirping of a bird is tzif tzif without.
Kokoriko is the crow of a rooster.
Yes, cock-a-doodle-doo. At least when I was a kid, that's That's what the roosters were saying in the 50s and 60s. Cock-a-doodle-doo. Maybe they say something else now. I don't know. Okay, all right. So interesting stuff, right? Learning from the animal world, and this would be, I'm sure somebody's PhD dissertation has been the usage of animal imagery in the book of Proverbs, and yeah. Now, it's funny because McCann, who's an older yeah, I think I bought it in the 80s or 90s, McCann or McCain. So he says, oddly enough, the author of Proverbs doesn't point out the negative aspects of the ants because they eat at the seeds, or they steal the seeds. I don't know what it is, but of course this is not about ants. All right, this is not, that would be missing the point. It's not about ants, and the Septuagint, it's not about bees. By the way, when we have LXX, that's the way we write Septuagint in biblical scholarship, meaning the 70, right? The translation of the 70, LXX.
Can you,
Okay.
70 what? Can you remind me?
Okay, so Septuagint, there are two versions of the legend as to how the Bible was translated, the Hebrew Bible was translated into Greek. And this is happening in the 3rd century BCE. And the two legends, one of them is from something called the Letter of Aristeas, and the other one is found in bits and pieces in Talmudic literature. So it was out there. So it was an oral tradition about how it came to being. And basically the gist of the story is both in the Letter of Aristeas, which we have in Greek, and is added in many Septuagint editions as the introduction to, oh, you know, I know where it is. I always, but it's meant to be an introduction to the Torah, to the Hebrew Bible in Greek, is that the King Ptolemy, the whatever number he was, in Alexandria, wanted to build the greatest library of the world, which is somewhat historical. There was a huge library in Alexandria, and then it burned down. And when it was looking for, and he had his wise people go out, his sages go out and get all the books of the world that they knew. And he says, he checks in with them. He says, did you get all the books? They said, well, all but one. There's this Torah that's on the other side of the mountains, and nobody speaks the language. We can't translate it. So he says, well, go there, get some wise men and bring them here, and they'll translate it. So the legend is that they found 70 sages. According to the Talmud, they're rabbis, chachamim. According to the Letter of Aristeas, I don't know what the word was in Greek, what it reflected, but 70 wise men who would come and translate. And now there's a diversion between the traditions. And I don't remember who says what Talmud says, what Aristeas says, but either they were put on 70 islands in the Nile River, or the other tradition is they were locked into 70 rooms in Ptolemy, the pharaoh's, the king's palace, so that they would translate without being influenced by the others. And miraculously, they all came up with the exact same translation of the entire Hebrew Bible, word for word, right? So it's a legend that gives gushpanka, gives, I don't know.
Credibility.
I can't remember the word. Yeah, it gives credibility to the translation, and almost as if not as if it was as setting it up as being divinely inspired.
Meant to be.
Right?
It was meant
If
to be.
all seven, yeah, if all 70 came up with the exact same word for each of the translate, and then the Talmud tradition has some examples which are not found in what we have as what we call the Septuagint today. By the way, there's multiple manuscripts, and more or less there's agreement, but so one of the famous things was, I think maybe rabbit. Rabbit, the word for arnevet was translated one way, hare, and not rabbit, because whatever, if they had translated what should have been the translation, that was the name of the king's wife, something like that. Those kinds of little things that they're, and I remember knowing that in another example, which I don't remember now. And when Professor Emmanuel Tov, who was the world's foremost expert on the Septuagint and was teaching at Hebrew University, he went on to publish all the Dead Sea Scrolls or make sure they were published that hadn't been published by the 90s. Professor Emmanuel Tov is giving us the introduction to biblical literature. And he presents, and I didn't know he was the world's most expert, anyway, he presents the Septuagint as a good source for sometimes understanding when we have a challenging text in the Hebrew, perhaps there was another word there we can look at by looking at the translation in the Greek. And I raised my hand, the yeshiva bocher that it was, I said, yes, but Professor, how can you say that when we know that that translation was megamati, tendacious, what's the word? Has a tendency? No, nobody? Anyway, that it had its own agenda. How can we trust it? He says, he stops, he says, and where does my sir, yeah, Adoni, me'efo minai Adoni yada b'targum hashivim? In other words, what the hell do you know about the Septuagint literature? And I said, well, the Talmud is there's this, and this is, oh, no, that's in the Talmud. We don't have that version at all. Okay, what am I trying to say? That there were lots of Jews in the 3rd, 4th century BC already, but certainly 3rd century onwards, BCE onwards, who didn't speak Hebrew. They needed a translation into Greek. And because it was so prevalent, not just in Alexandria, Egypt, but certainly in other parts of the diaspora as well, where Greek was spoken, that there was a need for it. And so that text became the sacred text of the church. And when the church, often in New Testament literature, when they're quoting something from the Hebrew Bible, they're not necessarily quoting it directly from the Hebrew, they're quoting it. It depends which book and where or when. But they're quoting from the Greek text itself. And so that's really interesting, translations. And then there was a Latin translation that was very, very common in the first few centuries of the Common Era, but it was a Latin translation of the Greek, of the Hebrew Bible. So it was twice translated until Jerome's, who's known as Saint Jerome Hieronymus in the 5th century, 4th, 5th century. He studies Hebrew by his own account with the rabbis in the area of Bethlehem. And he does his own translation, which becomes, instead of what we call the Old Latin translation, which is a translation of a translation, he does his own direct translation from the Hebrew, and we call that the Vulgate or the Vulgata. Okay, but maybe a little bit too much, but yes, Ella.
The Septuagint only the Torah, or it's also Nevi'im and Ketuvim?
So that's a good question, because the legends talk about it being the translation of the 5 books of Moses, but it's all of the entire Hebrew Bible. And
So
sometimes that
Tanakh.
translation is,
It's the whole
and sometimes
Tanakh.
that translation, is very different. So for instance, the book of Jeremiah is in the Septuagint is 5/8 the length of what it is in Hebrew. Not necessarily that it's not that the chapters were cut off after 5/8, but there's less text. In other words, it reflects an earlier version of the book of Jeremiah than the one that the Masoretic text that we use has. That's really interesting. And sometimes the pieces from fragments or whole sections from the Dead Sea Scrolls, they don't reflect what we have in our Hebrew Bibles, but they reflect what's in the Septuagint. Only going to show that there were multiple versions of the Hebrew. It's silly to think there was only one version of the Hebrew. That's naive, right? But 2,000 years ago and more, there were different versions, not hugely different versions, except for in the book of Jeremiah, perhaps. And what scholars have posited with Jeremiah is that when the Greek was translated in the Hebrew, they had an earlier version of Jeremiah that didn't have updates as to what happened after Jeremiah lived. Yeah.
So it was the whole Megillah?
It's a fascinating time. The Ganze Megillah. So say it again, is that what you said?
Yeah.
So it's
Yes, the
interesting.
Ganze Megillah.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because the only book which is not represented, I mentioned this lately in one of our classes, the only book which is not represented in the Dead Sea Scrolls is the Book of Esther, the Megillat Esther, which is because some people say, well, see, it wasn't accepted into the canon, at least of the Dead Sea Scroll community, and they say you can't prove something from silence, no argument of silence, right? Okay. Anything else? So let's take a look at Midrash Mishlei. I want to do some more work on Midrash Mishlei. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like Sefaria has the whole English translation. I don't think I have one, which means I just have to, if I want to bring things from Mishlei, I've got to spend quite a long time translating it into English back for you folks. But this section was translated, and Midrash Mishlei being a relatively late Midrash, says my connection's unstable. So if I freeze, just give me a minute or two. So Midrash Mishlei is a later anthology of Midrashim like Midrash Tehillim, which collects from different places. Sometimes we have them written in different corpusi, whatever, books. And sometimes we don't have them anyplace else. But let's take a look at this particular one here. Dan, if you would.
Go and observe the ant, lazy bones. Rabbi Yehuda ben Padya says, the wicked will one day come before the Holy One and say, Master of the world, let us rest and we'll make tshuva before you. The Holy One responded to them, idiots of the world that you see yourselves in is like living on Erev Shabbat, whereas the world as it is on Shabbat. I'm having trouble understanding that. Okay. If you don't prepare for Shabbat on Erev Shabbat, what will you eat? Another example might be that the world in which you see yourselves is like being on dry land, whereas the world as it is already is immersed in the sea. What are you going to eat when you're at sea if you haven't prepared when you had time on the land? Another example might be that the world in which you see yourselves is like an entranceway to a home, whereas the world as it already exists within the living room. If a person doesn't prepare to unlock the door, how will he enjoy the comforts of home? Another example might be that the world in which you see yourselves is like a warm, sunny day, whereas the world as it experiences experiences a downpour of rain. If you haven't sowed, reaped, or harvested your field when it was sunny and warm, how will you sustain yourself when it rains?
Mhm.
So interesting from a pedagogical point of view, a little complicated, but echoing a common rabbinic view that this world is only a passageway into the world to come. Olam hazeh domeh prosdor, right? And the real world is the world to come. In this case, hard to know if it's talking about just your own soul and your own soul's future world of going to heaven or being in paradise, or what happens when Mashiach comes and everybody comes back, and who are the people that are enjoying that world and who are the ones who are not.
I think it's preparing yourself not for the next world, but for this world. In other words, if you don't cook on Friday, you won't have anything to eat for Shabbat.
Right. So yes, and that is a reality. Of course, it's assuming you keep the laws of Shabbat. Right. From the time when Jews weren't strict, so we'll go to Burger King, or we'll take something else.
Preparing for Shabbat is just an example. And then he goes on in a lot of words saying you have to prepare yourself for the next day.
Yeah. So
Or
what
a
he
day.
In other words, for the future, if you don't study or if you don't save money, you won't have anything to live on.
Right. So I guess maybe we can agree there's two levels to this. One level is regular life, which is continuing with well, I mean, that's what Proverbs is talking about. Proverbs is not talking about the world to come. Proverbs here in the first section talking about this world, but it seems to me that in the background of this is another meaning. The other meaning is that whatever you're doing here, you should know that's also reflective of what'll happen after you die. And this way, this is a homily built on this text. Les?
Well, it's saying that don't wait till you're dead to ask God for forgiveness. If you wait till you're dead to make tshuva, which you have to do while you're alive, it's too late. Is that what it is beginning
So
there?
I think it's on both of those levels. Yeah. Um, so another thing, yeah, echoing the rabbinic dictum also as well is that you have to do tshuva before you die, or the day before you die. Then the question that is, well, how do you know when the day before you die will be? And the answer is exactly every day. You never know. Yeah. I'm reflecting a lot. I'm watching this series on TV. I'm watching it on Netflix called Travelers. It's not new so much, but it's about a group of people from the distant future whose consciousness is projected back into bodies by this AI called the director. And every time they're projected, it's when the record is somebody's about to die. Somebody with a body is about to die. So at the few moments before they die, they start holding their heads and the consciousness is going into them. So every time that happens, I'm thinking of the body, the person who lived in it beforehand, and then who continues to live in it afterwards, and what that means from a tshuva point of view. And I think that's in the background of the script as well, of the show, is that how can people be redeemed where their body did something perhaps problematic? How can they be redeemed afterwards by some other soul using their bodies? It's an interesting question, philosophical question. And of course, humanity that in the future has totally annihilated itself or is annihilating itself. How can they do better going back in future? And for me, that's interesting stuff. Anything else on this section?
One thing it made me think of was, okay, one of the practices that led to the Reformation, the idea of indulgences, that people thought they could buy themselves um, a better place
They could buy
after a
themselves
while.
pennies.
Yeah,
Yeah,
buy
pennies for pennies.
themselves forgiveness or whatever they've done in their life.
Yeah, yeah, and it's kind of you guarantee so you could do, and it's kind of not retroactive. It's well, it's retroactive when you die, but it's like it's a little bit connected to the Kol Nidre, the difference of Nusach, of the wording of Kol Nidre from this Yom Kippur, from last Yom Kippur to this Yom Kippur. I asked that my oaths be annulled. That makes sense, but somebody added at some point from this Yom Kippur until the next Yom Kippur. So you're on Kol Nidre, you're trying to say, and you know what? I asked forgiveness for all those promises I made that didn't keep, all those commitments I made that I didn't keep. And not only
Is
from
that like
last
a
Yom
pocket
Kippur,
pardon?
say it again.
Is that like a pocket pardon?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but I'm also asking going forward.
That's what a
Lots
pocket
of
pardon
rabbis
is.
said, what the hell is that? You can't do that.
That's what a pocket pardon is where the chief executive pardons someone in advance of the crime.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a get out of jail card, right?
Mm.
Okay, cool. Excellent. All right, then. Rita Claire, would you like to read 12 to 15 for us?
A scoundrel, an evil man, lives by crooked speech, winking his eyes, shuffling his feet, pointing his finger. Duplicity is in his heart. He plots evil all the time. He incites quarrels. Therefore, calamity will come upon him without warning. Suddenly, he will be broken beyond repair.
Okay.
Hmm.
This is the beginning of another section about, in general, being a good person, not specific. This is a general statement. I cut it off here because the next statement after this is a self-contained, almost poem that I want us to study the midrash that was developed around it. But what we have here though is go back to the body part. We said, remember I said body parts and animal kingdom. Here there's no animal kingdom. but there is a lot of body parts that will, in the end, be broken beyond repair. So what are the body parts we have here?
Feet.
So
The mouth, the eyes, the feet,
Right.
your fingers, your heart.
yeah, and so apparently this is very common in world literature in general, that when you enumerate the different parts of the body to this extent, it's another way of saying the whole person. Nothing terribly complicated about that. It makes sense, but that's what the narrator, the poet, is doing here, right? And lest you be thrown off by it says speech, but in the Hebrew it's ikshot peh. It actually says the crookedness of the mouth, because the idiom crookedness of the mouth means speech, but from a poetic point of view, you do have the peh, the regel, the eyes, the feet, the eyes, the finger. Yeah. I don't know. So a lot of, I saw quite a bit of conversation in the two commentaries that I was using about winking eyes, shuffling feet, and pointing fingers. Winking eyes, I think we winking eyes somehow is related to deceit already for a long time, not just when we wink to as if we're, but there's something doing that action. There's something a little perverse about it, not hugely perverse, but partially perverse. Shuffling feet, what does that mean? We don't really know. Could it mean, maybe I would say, I think it means a lack of stability. That's what I mean. I'm thinking of the guys in the coffee houses that are in Starbucks that are bouncing their knees, or on the airplane, God forbid, next to me, the ones who bounce their knees. It's hard for me to take, even if I don't feel their knee, but you do feel the vibration, but the feeling of that anxiety that somebody has. But pointing a finger, didn't see anything really. The commentaries I have, they kind of throw up their hands. We really don't know what this means. I originally thought maybe pointing the finger at others, maybe, but then I came up with what I think is a novel 20th, late 20th, early 21st century interpretation of pointing his finger telling somebody, is flipping them the bird, as we used to say. I don't think that's what it means in the simple meaning of the text, but it does mean that we use different body parts to position ourselves as opposition, as opposing the good. And in using all those different body parts, I like the last line, and suddenly he will be broken beyond repair. Anything else? Okay, so where we will continue next week has to do with is connected to that. The third to the last line, he incites quarrels. Yedanim yishaleach, someone who causes other quarrel, and so it kind of rounds out nicely our material for today, which began also with two people and a third person getting involved as the guarantor, a warning against that, and then in general about living a life full of vitality and getting things done, and not being an evil person who separates people, who causes a separation between people. Again, that third person causing trouble between two other people. Great. Well, thank you, Tanya, for hosting and doing the hosting today, and for all of you who have sent in your sponsorship for Jews to the Booze. We'll meet again next Wednesday. I know it's Thanksgiving that, but we'll meet Wednesday, but we won't be meeting, I think, the week after. We'll be taking a break because the week after is the day of Jews to the Blues. I probably, it may be a little bit too busy for me, but I'll let you know next week, I hope to know. And then Sasha and I will be away in Israel, and I'll be Israel and the monastery in France. I'll be after that at Taste. So we'll be taking a break towards the end of the month. And if you want to join us Hanukkah and you want to For the book signing, we'll have some books available from Todd Goldberg, but you can also get the book now if you want to read it until then and ask clever questions. You can order on Amazon if you will, but I have a pile of them and I'll bring them to your house, or I'll get them to you. And we're asking for a $25 donation, which will cover our costs. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Mhm.
Bye-bye.